Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to the Next Step 2029 Facilitator Education. Before we dig into a little bit of background information and explanatory levels, I'm going to explain a little bit how this education is built up. It's built up in modules, and this is module 1. And the first module will also run a test group from April, May, and June, where we will meet up once a month at 3 hours at a time. Then this course material, after these 3 meetups, of which there will be lectures, that will be the end of this course material or the video series. Then it will be offered as individual self-study material where the beginning of the explanatory videos or podcasts will be like this one. And then there will be the 3 lectures that I held as part of the meetup of the project group, because it is going to be perceived as a kind of a project group. It is likely that module 2, which is about other worlds, other sciences, as well as module 3, other worlds, other life forms, and a possible module 4 will be offered as a 3-month test or project group where I again can offer it as part of a test group where we will discuss the course material as well as investigate whether or not it is possible to instigate this type of changes. And then once the test group is done, then it will be offered as an individual course material that will be studied whenever people feel they are ready for the different modules. Of course, it would be nice if it could run as a ever ongoing project every year, and there is a possibility of that, but it all depends on the global and the collective energies of our reality field. As you by now should know, since you most likely or hopefully have done the energy work and your timeline course, and you have also done or are still doing, or depending on when you're listening to this podcast, it is now December 2024, at the end of the year of 2024. And I am running the sets of the energy construction work that follows with the subsidiary timeline. I have explained other places, and I held a webinar on December 7th where I explained that the choice of the Americas in November 2024, where a certain person was re-elected president, was a kind of moving back into the original timeline. And in that webinar, I explained the dynamics of the original timeline, the first run through, and how that led to unfortunate futures. I've talked about this many places, all across the board, as it's said, both within the new grand cycle material, the transition sciences, the progression sciences, the change maker material, all of the material I made so far have had that possibility of the original run through that led to and leads to unfortunate futures where humanity literally ceased to exist, and a very, very small group, we're talking 5,000 people of the entire human population, survives and ends up teaming up with a specific group from the also falling and dissolving Andromeda galaxy, and they team up and become what we kind of call the white hats that have been traveling back in time, trying to change the course of history. It has been a very, very complicated journey for all of those who participated in this. And the losses have been great, myself included. And because I come from that future, I entered into this system via old Andromeda technology that allowed me to step back in time and enter into our reality field back in, well, I'm born in 1968, and there are a little bit uncertainty when I actually entered, because I have past lives. When I entered, I got snatched, like many that have participated in the subsidiary timeline and our attempt to try and build the subsidiary timeline. And I think it's important to truly understand the challenges of these people that amounted to 5,000 humans and 3,000 Andromedans that technically are also to be viewed as a sort of humans. They're not humanoids. And the use of technology, the traveling back in time, including when with entry into this reality field, we took on to ourselves to enter into the reincarnation cycle and took on a number of existences within the different nodal points of the reality field that were part of different sections of the human world as we know of it under the colonizing races that were instigating 15,000 years ago. Okay. I have memory prior to that, but that's due to other projects that I have participated in as part of this reality field before it became the enclosure and before it turned into what we now know as our world. So the groups of humans, this very small groups that chose to do the traveling back in time. And in the webinar on December 7th, I got the question, what does it mean to travel back in time? And I did not record that lecture deliberately, but I will here explain a little bit of some of the sciences that goes with traveling back in time, because there is no time. Step 1, step 2, you can't travel back in time. Step 3, when you exist in the true worlds outside the enclosure, there are no electromagnetic energies. It's all holographic energetic properties that are built up in different holographic networks, which I have explained many places, including in the book Souls of Humanity and the whole philosophy book. This is to be understood as the first step, that we are part of an enclosure that is artificial from A to Z. It is completely unnatural. And when you enter into this one, it's like cutting yourself off the true worlds or the original humanoid worlds. The Andromedas later on decided to team up with some of the humanoid groups that dates back to the internal strife and how they divided into groups that were pro the Atlantean projects and groups that were against the Atlantean projects. So we are always in this weird mess of things, dealing with groups that are pro and groups that are against. And that's just how it is. And that began with the internal strife. So with that foundation of polarity and different groups that want different things, we are also understanding that the things that led to the first run-through disaster was the Atlantean project. And with that, we also understand, and I'm just doing a quick sum up here, because in a way it's history and it's fading away. And the more we recall history and cling to the history and attempt to revive history in our memory, the lesser possibility there is to stay on the subsidiary timeline. So this is just a very quick overview, because it's not about going into the details of history. History is only relevant in our timeline clearing work. And those of us who have entered into the subsidiary timeline, we do not no longer have timeline work to clear up, because that were part of those of us who travel back in time, or those who were under the humanoid groups that were pro the true human reunification, as well as some of the future humans that were traveling back in time. So when we're talking about the subsidiary timeline that we were trying to build, the idea was foundationally that we would try to activate some of the original solar system humans that got trapped and enslaved as part of the colonizing programs, the extraterrestrial colonization from the regress races, as I've talked about in the book, The Souls of Humanity, and all of the other material of the whole academy. The success rate of this has been very low, unfortunately, Not only because those of us who travel back in time, I will give it an estimate 300 people. Once we entered, the technology we are talking about is a technology that runs on holographic energetic properties. What is transferred back in time is not a body. The body is put in stasis. The one I put in stasis in the Andromeda system is technically part of an Andromeda craft, where that is contained. As so far, I'm pretty sure by now the Andromedas have reunited with the future Andromeda, which because they chose a different trajectory of their own galaxy and what they were doing there. And they have now they were successful in instigating a subsidiary timeline, and with that, they have created new Andromeda. My body's in stasis there, that body that I chose to engineer for this purpose, because the original vessel I had were long gone. Let's put it this way, there are most likely an imprint of it somewhere, but the body itself, I made sure that there was no remnants because, as I said, in the future where I come from, this galaxy is dead. So there's no point in having a vessel or a body or whatever. What remains is an engineered vessel that were engineered to do this work of creating a subsidiary timeline. And that original blueprint is a new Andromeda. That's why I can connect to this, and they are feeding information there that then bridges into this physicality, because I have rebuilt the holographic energetic architecture that is necessary to first and foremost stay connected with the subsidiary timeline, but also via the work I have done in the chosen 7 or 8, I think there are 9 incarnations. I can only remember 7 of them. Recall memories of these 7 incarnations where I have worked with what was necessary to clear out so that the holographic energetic architecture could reconnect to the subsidiary timeline. And in that line of work, I have also created the whole academy material, the progression sciences for the original solar system humanities, whatever was left of them, so that they could reactivate and then enter into the subsidiary timeline. So it's been a very, very complex and complicated type of work. And I have always acted as the first of many. In each lifetime, I have been working through some of the challenges that humans have. And in this lifetime, I've been working through all of them, if not more, on all 12 lineages. That's at least how it feels, to clear out what was necessary to clear out. But in this lifetime, mostly focused on the councils that joined the regressed races, as well as the upper level of the library of the Pillar Project and taking down the Pillar Project. And in that, reuniting whatever was left of the original Pillar Project with the subsidiary timeline and beginning to create a new type of science that will then allow for that small group that are joining the subsidiary timeline to begin to create new type of sciences and new ways of what it means to be human. And that's some of the later work I'm going to do as the remainder of this lifetime. Right now, we're focusing on that small group that can jump into the subsidiary timeline or the original groups that came from the future. And when I look out, I see there perhaps only 30, perhaps even less left, because once we entered back into the enclosure, as I myself also remember, our operating vessels were snatched and divided amongst the different factions that are controlling this reality. And in that way, we are enslaved from A to Z like everybody else on this planet. There are, of course, groups within this planetary collective that have made agreements with the different factions, and by that are living with a larger degree of freedom. But at the end of the day, they're still part of the enclosure. And with that, if they step outside of the enclosure due to their actions, karma will hit them of the original worlds and they will cease to exist immediately. So the group that's left of the Atlantean groups that were trying to build into the 5th dimension and New Earth and whatnot have tried to circumvent this by their use of different types of technologies, and that's the project, the the genetic modification, etc., military projects and all these kind of things, which I at this point in time have no interest in reassessing or talk about again, because it's history, it's over, it's done, I erased it from my system, I can't be bothered with it anymore. We are back on the original timeline because what we could say, the rigidity and the counterforces that have worked again and again and again against whatever we're trying to do, whatever was present from the future was tracked down and destroyed, whatever consciousness was transferred from the future and into the current type of vessel has been intercepted, has the energy system, that the orb of consciousness potential, including the architecture of an expanded energy system that we were sending back in time, because you're not sending back a body, you're sending back this orb, and you're using the original gate systems, and you're merging into a physical form, not a walk-in, but a prior version of yourself, that version that had grown out of the past lives. And this is very complex science, because first you come in, I can only explain how I experienced it. First I came in, and that operating vessel was snatched, and then I was divided into different lifetimes. But I had some kind of what we call included type of programs on different artificial holographic levels of reality that I could connect to through each of these intersected or interput into these type of bodies that were chosen by the factions for me. And they were all miserable, horrible, and full of torture and all sorts of horrible things. So this entire molecular structure I am in today has got levels of pain and suffering to the degree that it is humanly impossible to really cope and grasp the levels of pain that my molecular structure and the biofield has been part of. As I keep saying, this body that I have now is technically not the original one, so it's not accurate to say that way. But the energy system this body died when it was 4, and then I was recalibrated into this one, and then it has become my body. So that means the molecular structure of this body, which also has its own incarnational issues and troubles and past lives and things that it has dealt with. Technically, this body was supposed to die when it was 4, and that's it, because it didn't have any continuation within. It was done, it was over, it was the end of a lineage. So with that, me coming into it in the age of 4, it has been a long line of recalibration, and right now it's not going so well. It is beginning to break down. It is not handling all of these shifts particularly well, because first and foremost, it's not my body. Secondly, the transformation of it was not supposed to exist so long, and onward and so forth. So these projects are super complicated, and nothing you know of, nothing you have seen anywhere. And it's only part of those of us who have the full memory. We understand this because we can see it and experience it and relive it, and by that integrate it as a knowledge of experience. Whereas if it's attempted to explain, people will hear with the knowledge they have and the understanding they have. And if you don't have the basic level of these advanced sciences and can see the technology and how it works and how that is done, then it's quite impossible to explain. But the important thing is that what was sent back was not sending back in time. It was sent back to selected nodal points that were supposed to be different types of existences within the enclosure to alter the main timeline so that the subsidiary timeline could be built by the different work that we had to do and were putting ourselves into doing. And each lifetime gave a little piece of the subsidiary timeline, which would then be a collective work of the 300 that was sent back in time. My first recall memories of that group I was part of was, as I said, being snatched. And we had a touchdown in, it's either Ireland or Scotland, and there we were captured. We were supposed to align with the original Celtic group that was left, because that Celtic group, what was left at that time, we're talking 14,000 years ago, if not 15,000 years ago, very, very shortly after the colonization. And they were in between still if they wanted to work with the future humans or they wanted to join the collaborating or the colonizing group. And we thought they were going to sway our side. Unfortunately, they had teamed up with the scavengers. And that meant that once our group had a touchdown and came into this reality field in our operating vessels, we were taken by the scavengers. And that was kind of it. So there are also other levels of, because you're saying, well, did you just go in as one version? No, we actually had 3 entry points. I had one 15,000 years ago with that one, realizing that the Celts had shifted side, and by that, that was it. Another version of me had some meetings in London with a specific group that I had hoped would some of the brotherhoods there would change. And I had a touchdown in Egypt as well with some of the original brotherhoods in Egypt, and each and one of these failed. I don't need to go into further details, just understanding this level of work where we are now embarking on the last attempt to run the subsidiary timeline. And that is what I want to explain here, because that's the important part. So we have the new Andromeda. That is, there are no humans there. It is what you would call a space station, if you like. It's a piece of artificial reality that upholds specific type of technology that is pumping 6-dimensional infusions into the core of our sun in the 6th dimension. It is creating an artificial 6-dimensional core in the sun. That is only going to be accessed when we have re-engineered what we could call a type of holographic energetic configuration, a code sequence that we have embedded into our molecular structure that will allow us to become the trinity between New Andromeda, core of the sun, and our cellular core. That's the first most important piece of the work that allows us to get on the subsidiary timeline. Until that is done, we're not on the subsidiary timeline. The subsidiary timeline is not complete. It has been, it's a success of 15% because that's all we managed to get built in the holographic energetic network. And it kind of goes into what's left of the safe zones of the restoration programs. There's one it ties into, and that's an intermediary place that where we can get access to the holographic teaching system that will assist us in the continuation of building what is necessary to remain on the subsidiary timeline for the rest of this life, as well as moving in through the gate system into the safe zone at time of death, if we can build the orb that is in alignment with it. If we can't, we won't have any access. Everything goes with genetic and energetic affinity. So that's the personal level of it. But there is a collective level as well. And that's what remains of the original true humans that are part of the solar system. There is a very, very small group, I think there are 1,000 of the original true humans that are situated in what we call inner Earth. Actually, it's true Earth. It's a reality field that is configured with the original solar system configuration, and they retracted there. We call it inner Earth because technically it's close to the core of our original reality field. That's not the sun, but the core of that nodal point onto which our planet has been built. And I've talked about these different types of configurations in the progression sciences. So in the original 4th dimension, original 5th dimension, and connected to the original 6th dimensional core of our planet was this little group that chose to stay behind as part of inner Earth. And in the original, long before the colonization, or when the colonization took place, a version of me chose to remain and become part of that group. So I have a future Andromeda version that kind of went into exile, and of the Andromeda fell. I have a version of the future humanities that grew out of the original version that stayed behind as part of True Earth, as part of Inner Earth. And at some point in that first run through, this group were forced into externalization. That means externalization. That means they were conquered in the original fourth and original fifth and were taken over by the colonizing groups. That has been prevented, fortunately. But that gives us another challenge. That means that group of 1,002 humans that are stuck there, even though they are in the original fourth and fifth and sixth dimension, they are technically encapsulated in these original fourth, fifth, and sixth dimension, and due to the circumstances of our planet, have not yet been able to find ways or gateways to leave and exhaust that secondary type of reality that was built, or what remains of the original solar system configuration. And that's a little bit complex, because you can say, how can a reality field be left? If it's not a part of the original one, then it should be, due to the laws of energetic and genetic affinity, be drawn to the original cycles of progression, but it can't, because at that point it was not the original cycles, it was under the Pillar Project, etc., etc. So hence also my work to take down the Pillar Project, so they were no longer tied to that configuration and that construction, that which has happened. Okay, so that's that step, but they still need a gateway out, and their gateway is the secondary timeline into the safe zone from where they can jump. And that's another high-level piece of information. And all of these things are, again, the less you know, the better. But just know that this work that we are doing here is both individual and personal, but it's also global and collective for that group, so they can get out. Because they can't, what they chose in the first run through was that they chose to be reborn. And that led to absolute disaster, because once that core fell, then everything collapsed in the solar system, literally. So the infusions from the new Andromeda into the solar core, as well as infusions into the true core of Inner Earth, is upholding a trinity where we become the individual representation of that. They become the original representation of that. So we have from the past in the original version of Inner Earth, and we have the current version of ourselves in the present on the secondary or the subsidiary timeline. And then we have the future where all is being extracted and reunited via the safe zones. With that science in understanding, again, as those of you who have been following my work for years, you know how many times we have tried that. We also have other groups, the Syrian bees have tried the same. The whole extraction, which is another way to call evac, because this is what it is, been evac since 2012. That has been different groups getting out whatever way they can, some in crafts, others through the gates, others through completely letting go of their organic vessels and leaving as orbs. So we are in a system, in an enclosure that is collapsing, going into chaos, going into entropy, because the event program, the artificial parallel universal matrix program that was supposed to uphold it, has not upheld it. New Earth is not going to happen inside the solar system. It's in a secondary reality field that is connected to what's left of the humanoids that were pro the Atlantean Project, etc., etc. What the takeaway here is that the main timeline, the first run-through timeline, that is now back in the game of the major groups of the human population, including the planet itself, will end up in that disastrous future, because that is where we're heading. So we are all back. The subsidiary timeline, we didn't get to the point where we could substitute it, unfortunately, because the counterforces, the deception level, the manipulation, the naivety, and the stupidity of the original true humans that were left at that time of the colonization, because most of the advanced groups had taken off once we got the news of the colonization. Most of the ones that could have carried the torch of the higher dimensions, the 612 pillar, they completely took off. And the 511 pillar at that time had already been devastated by both the Atlantean Project as well as the blow up of the fifth cycle planet. So what was left with the 410 pillar, which was the remains of the Sirian A Pleiadian groups that were part of the councils, which is the group that I have been releasing their bodies in stasis, etc., etc. Not going to go to that story because it's done, work done that's been since 2016 until 2024. That's all I've been doing, or actually more correctly, 2022. That's all I've been doing, releasing them and dissolving them and whatever, so that the library could be taken down and onward and so forth. So what's left is what came under the hands of the extraterrestrial colonization groups and their re-engineering, creating the artificial fourth and the artificial fifth dimension that is upholding the enclosure. So there are nothing left except that group of 1,000 people as part of Inner Earth. And some of them will be able to leave by crafts, others will be forced to go through the fourth dimensional gate, and others again through the fifth dimensional gate. And they are working to enter into the subsidiary timeline. So that's the work. We will leave through the same gate system. So let's say that's a joint work. That's their interest. They do have another out. If this is not possible, then they can be extracted through the original dimensional properties of the true Earth configuration with groups in the Andromeda system. And you're asking why they're not doing that already? Because there are the law of the cycles. They have to give it a shot. They have to do a specific type of work first to give whatever they can for the completion of the original projects. And if that cannot be succeeded, then there is a secondary possibility for this group because they're part of the original solar system humanities. And they made that alignment when they decided to stay. However, if they choose to do so, they will go out as rudimentary consciousness units, and that will only be the extraction to prevent it from being part of the falling angelic as well as the negative groups that will take over this reality field, which is what they did with the externalization to begin with in the first run through, and there they got snatched. And that gave grounds to an extension of the negative groups as part of the Atlantean project for quite some time that led to an even harder devastation cycle than it was necessary because they were fueled by different types of consciousness units they shouldn't have had access to. So consciousness units are fuel for the fallen groups, the dark groups, the inverted groups, the regress groups, or whatever they are. And I'm tired of talking about it, and I don't want to talk about them anymore. So when we're talking about what's the work for us, the work for us is to, in a way, it's a kind of an illusion that we are creating. And it's not that we are deluded, but we are going to be in this world without being part of this world at all once we decide to join the subsidiary timeline. And that's why it's a test. So the test is, step one, Inner Earth, True Earth, has to, what remains of True Earth, has to do this teaching, giving over, getting some of us to receive. As I said, in the first run through, they went into human forms. They're not doing this time, but the information they have, the configuration they have, what is left of Inner Earth must be given over to receivers inside the enclosure. That is us on the subsidiary timeline. So that's what they are doing right now. They're handing this over so that the knowledge has been given into the rightful hands as it's part of the law of the cycles. And then those of us who can receive it, we will carry that configuration, and then we will do with it what is the outmost possible scenario we can do with the sciences and the knowledge we have from Inner Earth / True Earth, original Earth. And that means that we will then carry the code sequences of what they have explored and developed as part of remaining behind in the cycles of the original solar system humanities and what that meant for the consciousness potentials. And those of us who can receive that will receive that code configuration. Once we receive that, our bodies and biofields, mental fields, and emotional field that is either aligned with the principles and the standards and the progression rate, as you have learned in the transition sciences and the template sciences and the reconfiguration sciences, we will then build that configuration that allows us to enter into the restoration program. And that's part of, or the safe zone. So once they have chosen to do, if they choose to do that, then they can be extracted by the new Andromedan technology. If we are successful in the next 4 years in building more levels of that subsidiary timeline, aka code stream, into the safe zones, one safe zone, it's only one, in the 6th dimension. If that is possible, then they will join us on the subsidiary timeline, remain as long as they can in Earth, and then we will be that double group that will work together for the next 50 years, and then we will all extract in 2065. So anyway, so this is what is on the table right now. But we also know all of these plans, as we know it from the CRNBs and the Niburans and all of the groups that have been doing the same thing, to honor the law of the cycles, to complete whatever they've been doing here and doing the giving over, because that's the evac, that's how it goes. You can't just leave, because if you leave without the giving over and the cleansing of the different nodal points in the holographic network you participated in, hence the timeline clearing work through the chiasm, if that is not done, you will be drawn back into whatever's left, and then you'll be drawn back into the main timeline, and that's the first run through, and you will then become part of that scenario, which we already have. And that was not a good solution, as I said. So what we could say, the only thing that has then been a success is that we now have that possibility of the extraction of the original true human groups, as well as whatever's left of us that were part of that group of inner Earth, as well as those of us who have come from the future. So that's a very, very small group of people. Okay, so while we're doing that, it is important as a facilitator of the 2029 timeline. This is an experiment, this is a test group, and that is where we will run the test, if it's possible, to just build what we could call small communities on the subsidiary timeline, which will make it easier for us to remain here the last 40 years. If we can create these nodal points of specific type of energy where we become the facilitators of the being the anchor point of inner Earth, us, and the Sun and New Andromeda. And this is where we'll begin to understand that technically it's a 5th dimensional piece of work we're doing. The body, the biofield, will be in the 4th dimension, infused by the 4th dimensional energies of inner Earth. And I just keep calling it inner Earth, but it is, always remember, it's true Earth. It's what remains of the original solar system project, the pillar project that's there. So the 4th dimensional biofield will carry the configuration which you have already laid the foundation for in your transition template, reconfiguration, clearing work, etc., so that can be linked up. And that goes through a specific type of experience that you will have no doubt that when that happens. And the first step of that one is it will break down your body. Simple as that, because you're being infused with the original 4th dimensional energies, and the body does not cope well with that. So there's a lot of learning processes of how to administer that. And I'm in that process right now, and I'm falling apart. Seriously, I'm in severe pain. There's absolutely no joy in doing so. So that's the first step of it, as the reconfiguration. And if it's possible, then the body will recalibrate and will reconstitute itself, so to speak, restitute itself, and then be aligned with the infusions of the 6th dimensional sun, as well as the 4th dimensional core energies from inner Earth. And I say core energies, meaning that it's the 6th dimensional core energies from the sun that will build the what we call kind of the extra layers of the molecular level, whereas the core of the cell itself, or the molecules itself, will be connected to inner Earth. So that means our cellular structure will change, but there will still be the affiliation with what we could say the outer reality, that to a degree will be, we will be in contact with that. But if we manage to do the reconfiguration of our molecular level, then it will be, we will repel the base program energy. So that's the first step. That's part of the sciences of inner Earth that is now being done with those of us who are on the subsidiary timeline. And only if we are on the subsidiary timeline can we undergo that configuration process. So that's the first step. And to get there, you have built it all yourself by your clearing work and all of these things. And some of you might think you're there. If you think it in your head, then you're not there. If you hope you're there, you're not there. So this is about true knowledge. You know if you're there. And you know if you're not. And that's the inner worlds will mirror to you exactly where you are, as they always do. So that demands clairvoyant abilities. And if you haven't got clairvoyant abilities yet, you are not there. Because this is about seeing, perceiving, knowing, understanding, full-blown what we're dealing with here. This is not where we invite everybody to the party. This is where you are here because you belong here. You have worked your way to get there. And you participate in this knowingly. And be very mindful of deception and telepathic downloads that make you believe you are more than you are, etc., etc. And that's some of the things we're going to talk about in this in the 3 meetups of the test group. And that lecture will be put there, but the conversations I have with the people in the test group will not be part of the course material. So that's how that one's going to be. And then it's, again, when we run these projects, we have one chance. So it would be so neat if I could repeat one group after another. But we have one chance. And the first group, they kind of lay the foundation of what's possible and what's not. And to be honest, I just feel that Inner Earth just wants this test group to unfold that one. And then the first group can do the giving over, and then they can take off. Then there will be, that's the molecular change, and that's the responsibility of a facilitator and building the nodal points. So that's the work inside this reality field. That kind of goes with module 1. And how we are to navigate that on the subsidiary timeline and the understanding of this and all the foundational levels of this one as we're moving into getting the giving over from Inner Earth. Then there will be the if we can step into other worlds of the sciences, that's the 5th dimensional level. That's the mind field that then gets recalibrated from that group of Inner Earth that is connected to the 5th dimension. They will then work with us with sciences and projects, perhaps communities and whatnot, where they will do the giving over. That's the externalization they are doing. Then once that is done, then the last piece is the 6th dimensional level, and that's the heart field that goes with the core of the sun. And that one will be what we could say the infusions of what's left of the true holographic network of the original solar system civilizations, and the lineages and whatnot will be transferred to those of us who carry that burden. And I'm saying it's a burden because that's going to be unpleasant. So anyway, so that's giving over. And that means those of us who get these infusions, we will then be the carriers of these code sequences, and then we will be the ones that will work with them as part of the externalization. Then that has been done. The what was played out in the first run through will then be repeated, but in a different type of work where we could say mergings are happening, where the giving over allows them to set themselves free. And this is it's a kind of piece of shit of work because it's a kind of transference of karma in a way. But they don't have karma in Earth, but they are under the law of the cycles, and they do have to give their high order potentials to those of us who can carry it, so that they can release themselves, dissolve their bodies, dissolve their workstations, dissolve everything, make it all collapse. And then there will be absolutely nothing left, and they can take out as the orbs because they have handed over all the potentials of the work that should be done. And that means that little group of us that will be on the subsidiary timeline, the estimate is around 50 people. They will then work with this. Either it will be broken down in their physical vessels and then it ceases to exist, which is part of the Ouroboros, and that's what the technology is in this reality field. Or it will become part of the orbs that will leave into the safe zones, and then there it will reconnect with some levels that will activate the different lineages within the safe zone, where we can then extract ourselves out of the reality field before it completely collapses. Anyway, so these are some of the advanced sciences. When we're in this line of work as a facilitator, this is the foundational backup plan for the evac. So that's the evac. Then there are always the possibility that perhaps there could be some kind of potential outcome that deviates from just the raw evacuation and extraction technology and the work to get the true humans out of here, what remains of them. And then the giving over, and those of us who are part of the subsidiary timeline inside the enclosure, carrying that burden, breaking it down, or merging it with our original holographic energetic architecture, and use it for some kind of good, as some kind of role model, as some kind of person that makes a change in the world, whatever that means, either within the fifth dimension as sciences, within the fourth dimension as a different way of being human, or within the sixth dimension carrying the gene code of the original lineages of the 612 pillar that will then be fueled by the core of the sun. And with that, eventually what was imbued into the sun at the remaining time of our existence inside this enclosure, we will absorb that from the sun, then that will be extinguished, and then new Andromeda technology will dissolve, and then we will be the only anchor points that's left with any of this technology. And then when we dissolve our body and our holographic energy system and all these things, that will be a process we will be taught from within, from the safe zone level holographic teaching system of how to do that. Once we then extract, there will be absolutely nothing left of the original solar system humanities, nothing left of the original pillar project, and nothing left at all whatsoever of the original progression cycles. What will be left to collapse into the first run through, and that will then happen quicker than it did last time. Last time they extended quite far into the future. This time, the deadline will be around 2135. That's a complete collapse of the solar system as we know of it. So with that, I'll end this first little podcast, and then we will go into the next one.